Every day, I wake up knowing that the more people I try to save, the more enemies I will make.
When you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Whatever life holds in store for me, I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility. This is my gift, my curse. Who am I?
Welcome, Marvel fans, to episode 16 of Marvelcast, a Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast by fans for fans. Each week, we will discuss the latest news regarding the MCU, followed by reviews and discussion of the latest released content in this ever-expanding multiverse. Our audience is a key component to our show, and we will wrap up each week by answering your Marvel-related questions. I'm your host, Steven, and joined by me like every other week is JG. JG, welcome back. How are you on this month of Spider-Man episode 2?
It's really good. It's been a good week. Work is kind of quiet right now. It's the end of the year, right before tax season, so it's a good time to catch up on some films, watching lots of Spider-Man content and things related to Spider-Man, like Deadpool. So good times.
It has been really good times, hasn't it? And it's been like you and I were talking off camera. There is just so much news, and to only pick a few stories to be able to talk about, it's hard to, ignore some of the other big events. And I think there's even some stories I'm going to save till we get to our Hawkeye discussion because there's just so much to talk about. So if it's okay with you, we're going to jump right in. This is the month of Spider-Man. We've been teasing it. We've been setting it up for the past couple of weeks. So later on in this episode, we're going to discuss the 2 Andrew Garfield films. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, JG, next week we're going to talk about the 2 Tom Holland films, correct?
That's correct.
And also do our preview episode of our predictions for No Way Home. It's hard to believe that. Can you imagine 8 days from filming this and 7 days from our audience listening, when we go and post this on December 9th, we're going to be sitting and watching No Way Home in just over a week. Can you believe that?
It's unreal because I feel like this movie, there's been so much build up to this movie, more than any Marvel film this year, that it's so unreal. Like, and the press got to see most of the Marvel movies like 3 weeks in advance. They're seeing this film just a few short days before we see it.
And I didn't include this in our news, but you mentioned to me yesterday, there's going to be a 3rd trailer being released on next Wednesday, December 15th. And I mean, I'm tempted to avoid watching this because we're only 24 hours away at that point. It's going to be hard to avoid. Are you going to plan on watching this and doing a reaction, or are you going to avoid it?
Every inch of my body does not want to watch this trailer just because of the fact that it's a day before. If this trailer maybe was coming out on Monday, I'd probably watch it. But the fact that it's coming out literally a day before, I at that point, there's no point. Like, we're literally about to see this movie, and I'm already hyped. My ticket's been bought for weeks.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try my best to almost do it's hard for me to imagine, but doing a social media blackout from that Wednesday, because I don't even want to see any pictures from the trailer. I have a feeling, maybe I'm wrong, but I have a feeling they're going to tease Toby and Andrew finally. But at that point, if I've made it that far into the waiting for this film, I might as well just wait one more day and see it in person. So we'll kind of see how that goes. We are going to skip our Story of Marvel Studio weekly pretty much until January, I'm going to say. We have so much other stuff to talk about. So we'll come back to that. I know JG is a little bit further ahead than I am in the book. But if you're listening and waiting for more Marvel Studio background information, that'll be coming back in January once we finish our month of Spider-Man. I pulled out a couple of key stories this week, and I kind of want to talk about them with you, with JG, with our audience, and I want to hear your thoughts as well. Our first news story this week, and a lot of them are going to deal with Kevin Feige, actually, because, of course, he's the one that's manning the ship. Our first news story, and again, we get a lot of our stories from the direct.com/MCU. This first one, MCU boss Kevin Feige reveals if the X-Men deal changed due to the multiverse plans. In a recent interview with Collider, Kevin Feige sat down and talked and said that, all the plans with Fox didn't really change the timetable on projects that were centered around the multiverse in the MCU. Here's his quote. I think we first mentioned, or the Ancient One mentions in Doctor Strange 1, when she's talking to Stephen Strange, to sort of mind-wrapping journey. And it was always one of the most powerful storytelling tools in the comics. One you have to wield carefully because it can get overwhelming. but one that now, with obviously the 60 to 80-year history of the comics, now we have a 20-plus-year history of the movies, and enough characters that we can start playing with it that way. He went on to go further and say that we have enough characters to start playing with the multiverse, and the purchase of X-Men and Fantastic Four characters are just more toys in the toy box. He says, I think the toys that we added into the toy box increased with the Fox acquisition, but it didn't change the timetable on when we were introducing the idea of the multiverse. So JG, it looks like Doctor Strange came out in November of 2016, a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago. And obviously, based on Kevin Feige's comments, they've been planning the multiverse way before, really before even phase 3 really kicked off, if you think about it. So you hear this, and Doctor Strange was kind of the introduction to this idea of a multiverse. Are you excited to kind of see them following through with these plans years later, that they've had a big plan and they probably have a big plan going forward? And are you glad that things didn't change a whole lot, even with this acquisition of so many new characters they didn't just rush to put in? What are your thoughts on Kevin Feige's comments?
Yeah, I'm excited. It makes sense though, because let's just say hypothetically Fox wasn't sold to Disney. They would still could do this multiverse storyline. They would do it with all the characters they have, and there is so much still potential. Yeah, we've seen the potential already, and we haven't even seen any possibility of X-Men or mutants. And so it is exciting now, because there's even more possibilities now that the X-Men are part of this. I will be curious, because I think they haven't, from what I've read so far, they haven't really talked much about it in the story of the studio's book that we've been mentioning a lot. So I'll be curious that if they do one for like the next decade, hearing some of these stories about the multiverse, it's going to be, because the Infinity Saga is so incredible and huge in on itself. But what are starting to tease with this multiverse just feels tenfold of that.
When do you think they would ever come out and, maybe give phases 4, 5, and 6 a title? Like you and I both said, this is the multiverse saga. It has to be, with the amount of focus on multiverse. And it's very similar to phases 1 through 3. Not every single story dealt with the Infinity Saga, but most of them did. Just like in phase 4 so far, not every single story is dealing with the multiverse, but again, most of them are. Do you foresee them making that announcement, or are they going to wait till they're maybe into phase 5 till they make some kind of big name for this saga?
It really depends. It's early, I feel, because it's early for us, the viewers, because obviously they know what's going on. They know they have probably a good idea what's going on for phase 5, and they have probably some loose ideas for what's going on for phase 6. It's hard to tell, because what if multiverse is really just a major part of phase 4? And like, obviously it's gonna have ramifications moving forward, but what if there's even crazier things ahead in phase 5 and 6? So I do think the multiverse is the primary focus as of now. It's more than likely it's gonna be that. I have a hard time believing that it could be anything else. But I mean, again, we didn't see Thanos until the end of Avengers, and then all the other stuff that was teased leading up to it. So we got a little bit to go, but I do think it just depends on where they end up going with. I think phase 5. I think once we start to see what's going on with phase 5, I think that's going to give us a good picture of what we're expecting.
Absolutely. And kind of continuing on now, just to kind of keep the train moving, we have another story that we have to report this week that JG and I found a little bit interesting. It's the idea here is that Marvel boss Kevin Feige, who again is usually behind the scenes, the rumor going around is that he's actually going to be more maybe involved in She-Hulk than originally kind of thought. And in the comics, She-Hulk actually breaks the fourth wall very similarly to how Deadpool does. And in a recent interview on a podcast on Geeks Worldwide, Casey Walsh shared that Marvel Studios She-Hulk will directly reference Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige. Here's her quote. "What I've heard about the show, it's like hard comedy, straight comedy, like meant to be extremely funny. She looks at the camera and talks directly to Kevin Feige in the show. That's part of the shtick. It's not going to be rated R, but yeah, it's kind of like Deadpool. It's supposed to be like a super fast comedy." So I know, JG, you and I have talked off air. You just rewatched Deadpool 1 and 2. And, She-Hulk's known for this breaking the fourth wall. Typically, we think of Kevin Feige as being the man behind the camera, the man that's making all these decisions, that's making this run successfully. Do you see this show kind of, again, breaking that fourth wall and talking to him directly? Do you see him talking back? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I look at it as this because when Deadpool breaks the fourth wall in the first two movies and even in the comics, he's talking to the audience. So I think this is a way of Marvel kind of like still keeping it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by having her talk to Kevin Feige. I don't think he's gonna show up on screen. I'd be shocked if he actually shows up on screen. I think she's gonna like kind of look beyond the camera, kind of like what they did in WandaVision, except we found out that that was Agatha all along. But I think she's going to look beyond. There's possibility that he might say a word or two, but I think more than likely she's going to kind of like look a little beyond the camera as if he is literally behind the camera. And I think that's a way for the audience to still feel grounded in the MCU, because I think it's because we've talked about this even with Deadpool moving forward with Deadpool 3, and whenever he does cameos, like it is going to be quite a shock for some people when that fourth wall is broken. And I think it's going to be less of a shock if you have it directed at a specific person or character, in this case Kevin Feige.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I would be very surprised if he made an on-screen appearance, because I think he typically likes to stay behind the camera. As the boss that's leading the ship, he had to approve this. So definitely, maybe this was someone's idea in the writer's room. He still had to give the green light on this. So I'm curious and I'm fascinated. I feel like most people who follow the MCU are aware of who Kevin Feige is. I'd say he's up there because without him, we would not be having this conversation right now. Without him, we would not be having such an intricate and detailed universe. So we have to give him credit, whether he wants to accept that credit or not. So I really do like this because, again, the hardcore fans, the ones that are watching all of the Disney Plus shows, all of the information coming out, they're going to appreciate that because they know who he is. Am I wrong in saying he's on the same level as Stan Lee? Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, I think he's up there. I think Stan Lee definitely. Yeah, I think Kevin Feige is starting to put his name out there. Definitely.
Yeah, he definitely should. All right, our next story, and maybe this should be called the Kevin Feige Show because we have another Kevin Feige story. Kevin Feige revealed the main reason for Tom Hardy's Venom cameo. So basically, here's his quote. Basically, when asked about the post-credit scene of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Well, I mean, you look at the obvious comic connotations between Venom and Spider-Man, and it's inherent. So the minute Sony made the Venom movie and it worked as well as it did, and Tom Hardy has become as iconic as he has become as Venom, then the obvious question is, how do we start to merge them? So JG, I hear this quote and I look at it, and it almost looks like the first Venom movie was a trial run. If Venom was successful, if Tom Hardy as Venom was successful as Eddie Brock, then Marvel Studios would be interested in maybe playing in this sandbox. Is that what you take away from hearing his comments?
Yeah, it's definitely the vibe I get, because up until this point, we really haven't had much luck with Venom, in film. In my personal opinion, it really wasn't portrayed super well in the third Spider-Man. We never got to see it with the Amazing Spider-Man, so it was definitely a risk. And I think with Feige, someone who's from what we've seen, very calculated, very planned, and very strategic in what he's doing and how he's leading the Marvel ship. It makes a lot of sense that they're not like, okay, before the first Venom comes out, like let's do like 3 more films. Like no, he's like let's see how this goes. And since it did, to at least audience acclaim, it was really received very well.
Absolutely, and I feel like he's showing faith in it. He's showing faith in Sony. And I think Amy Pascal really appreciates that because the two of them have not always been on the same page. But hearing these comments definitely makes me feel like they are continuing their conversation, which makes me happy. Because here's the thing. If Disney and Marvel do not own the rights to Spider-Man, I want them to at least play nice with Sony, because the more we get of this cohesive universe, this multiverse, the better it is for all fans. It's a lot better, and we'll talk about it later, than having a separate Spider-Man universe like Amazing Spider-Man, which isn't connected. So I definitely am all for this. Anything else on this comment before we move on?
Nope. It's just exciting that, they are willing to do this and that we are going to get to see more of Tom Hardy.
Yes. And hopefully we'll see him in about a week. We'll see. JG, you ready for another Kevin Feige story?
Oh, I'm ready. He's been busy. I mean, he's promoting this film, so it makes sense. He's chatting a little more than he normally does. So I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah, I'm glad he's dropping some teases. And of course, one of the big teases The big rumor is that next week in Spider-Man No Way Home, there's a rumor going around that we will see Charlie Cox reprise his role as Daredevil. And while we have yet to see any official confirmation that Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock and Daredevil will appear in No Way Home, we do have an update that Kevin Feige has stated the following. If you were to see Daredevil in upcoming things, Charlie Cox, yes, would be the actor playing Daredevil. Where we see that, how we see that, when we see that remains to be seen. You and I messaged about this, and you said this was the most Feige thing he could have ever said, because he confirms that, yes, the rumors going around are true that Charlie Cox will return as Daredevil if that character ever comes back, which he will. And he did not yet confirm that, yeah, you have to wait another week to see him. So you hear this quote, JG, I know you've been watching a lot of the Netflix shows for the first time. What are your thoughts? Because, Matt Murdock, Charlie Cox is so fresh in your mind. Are you excited to see this actor reprise the role, whether it be as a variant or a continuation?
It's so exciting. Like, he just brings such an emotional level to this character, and so such a traumatic character. And so just seeing him come back, whether it is a variant or not, I don't think it really matters too much in the grand scheme of things, because now with the multiverse, those stories do still matter. I'm excited. He really did a great job. I do think, going with some of the rumors, I just to set expectations, because I don't want anyone who might be hearing this for the first time. More than likely, when we do first see him, it's going to be as Matt Murdock. We're not going to see the full Daredevil stuff right away. So if you are hoping for that, just hang in there. We'll be seeing a lot more of Daredevil to come, like Feige says.
Yeah, I think they're playing their slow game here. I'd be willing to bet he will appear as Matt Murdock, and maybe we'll see him have some abilities, but still as Matt Murdock in No Way Home to set him up. I think based on his comic appearances, we will see maybe an appearance in the upcoming Echo show, whether that be next year or 2023. And I think they're going to play the long game. I think we will see a Daredevil, whether it be a Disney Plus movie or a theatrical movie or a Disney Plus show, somewhere down the pipeline. I would hope that they would keep it on Disney Plus instead of taking it to Hulu, because I do want everything kind of under that same Disney Plus banner. I want it to be the PG-13. I know it's not a story we're talking about today, but John Bernthal, who played Punisher, has kind of said he wants to keep it R-rated. I don't think we're going to get an R-rated Marvel project until Deadpool 3. So if that does well, maybe he'll get his wish. But again, I really like John Bernthal as Punisher. I'd like to see him even in a PG-13 version on Disney Plus. But who knows what the future will have for that character as well. Any other thoughts on Daredevil?
Nope. I'm very excited. It's such a good feeling, especially for those fans. Like, I wouldn't even put myself in that place, but the fans who did watch all those Netflix shows back when they were releasing, it's so exciting that for y'all, that these characters that y'all invested in, some people would be like, oh, these don't count, these don't count. Well, guess what? Now you can look back at them and say, yeah, these stories do count. These actors are still here, and you're gonna get to see more stories from them.
And I do have to give a quick shout out to Marvel News Desk, which is a Marvel podcast that I do listen to. And one of the hosts on there, has been doing a Save Daredevil campaign since Daredevil was canceled. And I'm so happy just to see her reaction on the Marvel News Desk podcast. If you get a chance, give it a listen. Because even though, again, we haven't received that official confirmation, they have done so many events in New York City at different Comic-Cons to really try to get Save Daredevil back. And I'm so happy for all those people that have been pushing for this for years, because it would have been a little bit of a slap in the face if they would have recast him. And I'm so glad that for fans that fell in love with Charlie Cox years ago, they get a chance to really see him in the MCU now. All right, moving on to our next story. Marvel is revealing that Shang-Chi is getting a sequel, and Disney Plus is getting maybe a spinoff in the works. So long story short, I'm just going to kind of summarize it here, that the director of Shang-Chi is going to be returning and making a long-term deal here with Disney through the sequel to Shang-Chi and also through Disney Plus. And here is kind of the quote. Destin is an amazing collaborator who brought a unique perspective and skill to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. We had a fantastic time working together on the film, and he has so many intriguing ideas for stories to bring to life on Disney Plus. So we're thrilled to expand our relationship with him and can't wait to get started. JG, you and I both really enjoyed Shang-Chi. Are you excited that even in just a few months after the release of the film, we're getting news and updates that a sequel's in the works and possibly a TV show? And also, what are your thoughts on what both of these products will bring to audiences?
I think it's just so exciting. We're getting fresh talent into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We always want that, and that's always so exciting. Because I think that was so fresh with like Shang-Chi and getting that vision, that perspective. And now, because of that, because of the fans' reception, and because of how successful it was, it is so exciting to see that. And then also, like this is they just talked about the sequel to Shang-Chi and also a spin-off series. This is more than likely a multi-year deal. We're going to see multiple projects in the Marvel Cinematic Universe from him. And so I'm so glad that this is getting rewarded. I'm so excited. I'm really curious what the Shang-Chi sequel will be about, because I don't feel like it's about the rings, even though that's the only thing that makes sense right now, because it's like the first thing was all about the rings. And so continuing that, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be discovered somewhere else, but I could be wrong. It does make the most sense that that's what the sequel would be about. I feel like the show is going to be definitely about the organization of the Ten Rings, and what the sister is up to with that. It's exciting. It's more diversity. I'm all about this. I think this is such a win for everyone and representation in general.
I agree 100%. My original thought when I heard about a TV show went immediately to the Ten Rings organization that his sister's running. It's very similar. I know we're getting a Wakanda TV show. And so I feel like these TV shows are a great way to expand the universe without even having the main character on there. In regards to a Shang-Chi sequel, I don't see this happening for the next couple of years because we have so many other products coming out and so many other films coming out. But wouldn't it be nice, where it left off at that post-credit scene where Wong kind of introduced him to be an Avenger with him and Katie? Wouldn't it be nice that if we're not getting an Avengers film in phase 4, what if Shang-Chi is kind of an early film in phase 5 and we see him adapting and learning how to be an Avenger? Because he was such a hero on his own, such a hero on his own journey with his family. Now he has to adjust, and it would be a great way to kind of touch base with our current roster of Avengers to kind of see where they're at, almost like a Civil War, if you will, where we see a lot of these characters, but it's still Shang-Chi's movie. Any thoughts? Would you like to see something like that?
Yeah, that is interesting, because like he has a lot of qualities that are similar to Steve, and so it would be kind of interesting to kind of see him kind of discover, especially someone like Sean, where he didn't really like see himself much more than he was like a car driver, or parking cars, and like he loved that. That was something he wanted to do. But now like his life, like they say in the post-credit scene, your life has changed forever and it will never be the same again. Like it would be really interesting to see now like what happens, and to also then see Katie, because Katie's obviously got to be there. You get the one and the two, like Katie like just completely made that film so much better. And like it's very rare that a character like Katie doesn't steal the show, but just adds to it and really just complements Shang-Chi so well.
Yeah, and I didn't include this in the stories, but I remember reading it this week. You haven't watched Iron Fist yet, correct?
No.
Okay. Jessica Hardwick, who is an actress who is in she's in Iron Fist, and she was in Force Awakens as one of the pilots. Okay. She came out with an interview this week. She's in the new Matrix Revolutions that's coming out at the end of the month. And basically she said that she chose to be in Matrix Revolutions over Shang-Chi. Now I'm really curious, and I wish we would get some information here. If she was up for the part of Katie, or if she was up for the part that she had, sorry, let me look up her role real quick. From Iron Fist. Because again, I think the Iron Fist and Shang-Chi kind of lore kind of overlap a little bit. So she played, sorry for the delay here. Oh, I'll come back to me. But again, so I was curious, the fact that she chose The Matrix over an MCU product really makes me curious, because, while The Matrix is a sequel to a film franchise that lasted for a while back in the early 2000s, to give up a chance to be in the MCU really is kind of shocking. So I am curious if they offered her role as, it was Colleen Wing is who she played. It just came to me in the Daredevil Netflix universe versus this role in the Matrix. So that kind of surprised me. All right, I've got one last story for us before we get into our review and our main topic this week. On on, I think it was it Sunday this week? We had our trailer released for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 2, and it's called Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. So I'm going to be honest. I watched the trailer, and before I could even message you, you had messaged me with a screenshot that said Part 1. And here's how bad of a fan I am. I watched the trailer and I turned it off the second before that Part 1 came out. And I thought you were like joking with me at first until I went back and rewatched it. So I didn't tell you this the other day, but man, the fact that you kind of dropped that bombshell on me that we're getting a 2-part for an animated feature film. I'm so excited because I love the first part of the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm so ready for Across the Spider-Verse. What were your initial thoughts on this trailer and what stood out to you the most?
It just stood out to me that they somehow are raising the stakes, not only just in the story, which we really don't even know what the story's about, but more specifically, the animation style. The animation in that first one is incredible. It's unreal. And like I remember reading back whenever this was coming out, like how many years it took for them to do it. Like it's extensive, like insane. But there's so many different art styles. There's so many, just the animation and just everything. It's so vibrant and beautiful, and it pops off like it is like a visual comic book in your face. And for someone who really doesn't dive too deep into comics, to see this as a visual medium, it's so beautiful. And it has the potential, like people are already saying that this is going to be a huge contender for best animated film. I mean, it's got some big competition with Lightyear coming out next year as well. It's so exciting. Like with what we're seeing with all this Spider-Man love, fans of Spider-Man are eating very good.
The first film was so unique in its style, and the trailer for this one, even though it was only about 2 minutes, was the same, what you expect, even bigger and better. And the fact that I know we're bringing in Oscar Isaac, is it Spider-Man 2099? Is that his name?
Yeah.
So he appeared in the post-credit scene for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And so seeing him, I think he's going to have the lead with the actor that plays Miles and the actress Haley Steinfeld, who plays Spider-Gwen. So do you expect, I know in the first movie, was it Jake, the actor from New Girl, he had the lead role as Peter Parker.
I know. I literally heard the name today, so I know who you're talking about.
Is he taking a back seat on this one and we're going to focus on other characters, or do you think he'll have more of a smaller role instead of being one of the leads like he was in the first movie?
I think it's gonna definitely be a smaller part for sure, because I think he was so significant in that first one, Jake Johnson, and you would want I don't know. We want to add some spice to it, because like then you get into the problem that if you do bring him back and do too much, while he is such a beloved character, you run into that, is this repetitive? And I think for something that isn't repetitive, like you could tell, like they are going guns to the wall. Like it is going to be bonkers, and just the possibilities with even Marvel and their multiverse and everything. There's a lot of potentials here that I think some people might not be realizing.
Yeah, I definitely think if you are someone that's listening to this podcast and you haven't seen the first movie, give it a watch, because like you said, I bet next week, everything we could imagine being part of this multiverse is fair game, including this film. Anything that's been produced by anything that has the name Marvel on it is fair game. And so I'm very curious to see what kind of connections we'll notice, like you mentioned. I mean, just throughout the trailer, the last half of it, when Miles Morales is being chased by Spider-Man 2099, the whole setting looks so unique and it's so beautiful, and it's just something you had never seen before. It's not your typical landscape. And I'm very curious if they're making this part 1, and I think part 2 would then come out in 2023, a year later. I mean, you don't do this just for the heck of it. You do it for big events, whether it's the end of a Harry Potter saga, whether it's between Infinity War and Endgame or the Hunger Games. So obviously there's got to be some major reason why you would break this film into two-hour films instead of just doing 1 2-hour film. You know what I mean? There's got to be something, major cliffhanger, some major connective tissue that's going to make you say, I need to come back a year from now. This isn't just saying we're doing Spider-Man part 1, part 2, part 3. It's trilogy. No, this is, you got your intro and now you got your 2-parter. So
this is technically the second movie. It's just in 2 parts. Like this is still like just movie number 2. It's just a 4-hour long movie number 2.
I can't wait. I mean, that's next October. It'll be here before we know it. And if we think about it, we've got No Way Home now in December. We've got Morbius in January. I don't expect freshman year, the TV show, to come out next year. Do you?
No.
It would be nice if it did, but with animation, I bet that'll be a 2023 product. We've got so much Spider-Man on the line. I know there's a new Spider-Man video game coming out next year. He is growing on me, such a great character. And this month has only helped me love him even more.
I agree.
All right. Let's now wrap up our news, and we're going to head into our review. Earlier today, on December 8th, Hawkeye episode 4 dropped. So, JG, you and I both talked about it briefly this morning. What were your thoughts to Hawkeye episode 4? We are now 4/6 of the way, or 2/3 of the way through the show.
Yeah, this was a super strong episode. This one really hit hard on a lot of emotions. It was a very emotional, very character-driven episode. It was definitely a lot slower from last week's episode. I kind of go back and forth between which one I like more, because the action scenes were so good that it impressed me. Action's really not my cup of tea. That's not why I'm watching these Marvel films and TV shows. But these character modes were almost equivalent, just as good, if not maybe better. And I love this connection between these two. I will say I'm so scared because they are emphasizing so strongly about him getting home for Christmas and him making it home. I hold on to the fact that I hope that this is a Christmas show and that they want to end happy because it's Christmas. But there's been a lot of foreshadowing towards Clint's fate, and I could see it going very bad quickly.
He's been a character that we've been following since 2010 with Thor when we first introduced him. Could you imagine if they actually did the Logan route and they killed him off in the finale, which again is on December 22nd? That would not be the best way to head into the holidays. I have a hard time believing that. I just really hope that they give him the proper retirement that he deserves. He is a character that, I was talking to my dad earlier tonight and he kind of was laughing because, all these other superheroes are gods or they have special powers or super serum. Hawkeye has a bow and arrow, but this show is delving into his background. It's delving into his ability set. We're seeing he's so much more than just a guy that shoots arrows. First of all, he's got awesome trick arrows. He has so many other skills and powers that can get him in and out of situations. He's a character that is quickly becoming one of my favorites. And he's a character that, again, probably is going to be retiring or passing away, hopefully retiring in the next 2 weeks, where maybe he'll show up as a mentor in the future. But he's a character that I love so much, and I don't want to see him go away. And like you said, there was so much emotion. When he was explaining to Kate about what happened with Budapest. First of all, I want to see a flashback from his point of view. But if this is what we get, it's what we get. When he was describing his relationship, his friendship, his love for his best friend, who he knows that he should have, in his mind, he should have been the one that died on Vormir instead of her. It was so emotional, and it makes me now want to go back and rewatch Endgame with a whole new light. Because here's the thing. When they had that brief they didn't even have a funeral scene. When they were at the lake with the 5 other Avengers that were all men talking about Black Widow, they barely got to scratch the surface on what she meant and how important it was. So I am so glad that this show is slowly taking the time, even though it's months or maybe even years later, to let Jeremy Renner, to let Clint Barton get that closure that he needs from that relationship they had. Wouldn't it be great if he gets that even more, if he gets to finally talk to Yelena in the next 2 episodes? So, sorry, you keep talking because I'm just so emotionally.
It definitely. Just even thinking about the possibility that he could go is wrecking me right now. It was wrecking me this morning. I love the parallel, and I think it's so to tie into what you were just saying. I love the parallel where Kate's falling, and he goes to catch her, and it's literally I would. There's images probably on the internet. Shot for shot, it's exactly replicating Endgame when he's holding Natasha. And I think what's so powerful is that whenever he's letting go of Natasha, she's falling to her death. He's letting go and basically killing her. In this instance, he's letting go to save her life. So the parallels there is just so it's so I love the detail, the attention to details, and it's not even just in these moments that they're mirroring and calling back into MCU. Like I've seen so many screenshots of people taking screenshots from the show and comparing it to a comic from the 2012 or whatever year that comic was. They are putting a lot of soul into this project, and even though he might not be a favorite, they are putting everything into this to make him one of your favorites.
For sure. It's just, you feel for him, you feel his emotions, you feel how he's grown as a character. I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever I was sitting in the theater watching Endgame, knowing that the next year, without a pandemic, we were supposed to get a Black Widow film, when I'm watching that scene on Vormir, I really thought that was going to be Hawkeye's death. I really was shocked that she was the one that died when we knew we were getting a Black Widow film and we didn't hear anything about a Hawkeye series or film. So her death still resonates with me, and just like that scene where these two loved each other, not, sexually, but they loved each other as friends. They loved each other for what they meant to each other. And it was just so powerful because you don't see a ton of platonic friendships like that where they're so powerful. And I really do hope we get more. I wish there was a way we can get more flashbacks. Wouldn't it be amazing if, when Clint is hopefully explaining to Yelena what really happened in their backstory, if we could flash back and see a young Clint with a young Natasha? Because in Black Widow, the movie, we saw some scenes that were back in probably the late 90s, early 2000s from Natasha's point of view, but we have not yet seen Clint in Budapest. And we've heard them talk about Budapest since 2012. Show it to us already.
Yep.
Did you love the scene as much as I did when they were decorating the tree and learning different tricks together and just talking, and, the whiteboard that's not a whiteboard? Like, their relationship is so pure and so beautiful. Do you not love every interaction with those two?
I love it, but those are the scenes that are like making me so nervous. Like it's setting this up for heartbreak, and like the whole like don't meet your hero and don't, like, all these things, and it's just, I'm filled with so much joy because he's being this grumpy old man. He's like, "You're not my partner. You're not my partner." Okay, you're my partner. And now they're like watching Christmas movies, decorating the tree, shooting arrows, doing tricks. But again, my whole thought is like, please, I want you to come home alive to your family. Alive. Key word, alive.
All right. So that brings me to his family for a second, because
Yes.
his wife was speaking in a different language. She is researching for him. I mean, you don't think his wife is also a SHIELD agent, do you? Do you think, or did he just train her to, hey, something bad could always happen. Here's what you need to do to survive? I don't think she's a SHIELD agent, do you?
I don't think she's a SHIELD agent. I think she was a former widow.
Oh,
And that's
imagine?
why her connection is so close to, that's why she has such a close connection to Natasha. And then now to explain, because I know people are going to be like, well, she can't have kids. We don't know. They could be adopted for all we know.
Wasn't she pregnant in Age of Ultron?
I don't remember. It's been a hot minute. She might be.
She might have been, but even though she could have been a Black Widow that didn't go through that procedure,
or at the least connections to the Black Widows.
Well, that would be fascinating, because there's definitely more than meets the eye, because we learned more about her, I feel like, in this one episode than we did
that one
about her
scene.
appearances. Yeah. That's interesting.
Because I think the watch, I think it's hers. I think his friend, it's talk about her, and because if it was to come out that she was a Black Widow, all hell's gonna break loose for their family. Like that, you need to keep that locked down. And again, it just goes back to also the relationship with Natasha. Like it could be just a completely like left turn and be a whole new hero that we just don't expect. I think this is hers. I think this is her watch. She knows a lot about it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next about the watch, because, listening to how he described it, I originally was thinking it was going to be Wilson Fisk Kingpins, but not the way he described it as being someone whose identity could be revealed if it comes out. I think that would be interesting. And, I'm going to throw out another wild theory. If you're saying she's a Black Widow, what if, I know in the comics, Hawkeye at one point is either married or engaged to Bobby Morse Mockingbird, who was on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, could this be an older version of Mockingbird? It's possible. I'd hate for them not to use Mockingbird to her full potential like they did on Agents of Shield, but it's definitely possible. Yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting to reveal that the watch belonged to his wife and she was actually a hero all along. And we could always see Linda Cardellini, the actress, kind of step up. She's still young. She's still fit. She could play a hero still. I'd like that. But then they gave up. Maybe they're both going to give up their responsibilities to really raise their kids the right way. I don't know.
It's interesting. It's there's a lot of potential there. I know. All of a sudden though, like that wife became 100% sus in a good way. Like I don't speak in a whole new language, you know, a whole lot about this. And on top of all of this, she's able, like he like, tells her like research this, do that, and she's able to do it. Excuse me, what?
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to get more information on her. And then when we go back and watch Age of Ultron and when we go back and watch Endgame, like we're going to see her in a different light, which I really like her as an actress. So I'm really excited to kind of see what they can do with her because there's so much potential. There really is.
I'm so appreciative though, because I remember before this season was starting, and I think we even mentioned this at some point on the show. I'm so appreciative that like they never went down the route where there was the theories because of like when it opens up with him away with the kids. I'm glad they never went down the path of them being separated or anything like that. I'm glad that was all just theory because there is so much good chemistry with them, and I'm excited to see where it ends up going.
And it really makes you think, you know, and they talked about the blip on this episode. If you had lost your family for 5 years, like here's the thing, and he mentioned like everyone lost people. Well, he lost everyone. He lost his wife and his 3 kids. Like, I feel like most people, if the blip were a real thing, everyone would lose someone. But I don't think a lot of people are going to lose every single person that matters to them. So he did lose more than most. And that put him on a very dark path, you know, to try to make amendments, to try to take back. I don't know where I was going with that. But basically, again, the whole idea here is he has definitely gone through more than most. Really, the big build up for this shorter episode, it was only about 35 minutes, was on the rooftop. So they're out now to try to find the watch, and after his wife kind of gives him the location, they go to the apartment, which turns out to be Echo's apartment. And I thought it was really fascinating how, you know, Kate was the one that snuck into the apartment, even though Clint was the one that wanted to do it. And the whole conversation where Kate is fighting Echo in the apartment, where Clint thinks he's fighting Echo. Like that whole reveal, like we knew she was coming. Talk to me about the final fight scene that really just kind of blew my mind. Did it blow yours as much?
Yes, especially as of like last episode, saying, "Oh, Yelena's not going to show up. Yelena's not going to show up." And what does she do? She shows up in the freaking next episode. I tip my hat off to the writers. I tip my hat off to Kevin Feige, everyone involved. Y'all keep us on our toes, even when we think we're smart and we can predict it. You continue to shock us. It was just such a great reveal because you could tell instantly with the way that she's fighting and what she's using to fight. And then once the mask does come off, she doesn't say a single word, yet she steals probably arguably the whole episode. You know, arguably the conversation with the wife and the watch is a big moment too. But I think for most people, she just stole the whole episode, and she just looks, and then she goes away, and that is it for this episode. Oh man, I'm so excited. She's so good. She's so funny too. So there could be some great comedy, and you know that when they do talk, oh my gosh, get your tissues. That is gonna be heartbreaking.
And Yelena didn't say a word this episode, right?
Nope, not even one.
So I was so excited. Like, here's the thing. Even though I would be willing to bet money that she was the one that was fighting him on the roof, and especially like when the Black Widow, like electric shocks came out, again, I felt so confident. But when her mask got removed and I saw her, I even yelled for joy this morning before work because I was so excited, even though I knew it was coming. I almost wish, wouldn't it have been something, well, you needed that post-credit scene, really, you did. But wouldn't it have been something if we could have avoided that and just like the shock of seeing her without knowing she was going to be in it would have been even cooler. And the fact that we got Yelena now twice between May and December in 1 year and seeing this character growth and seeing it's remarkable because like this is our new Black Widow. This is the character that we're going to be seeing probably for the next 10 plus years of the MCU. We're not going to see her every year, but we're going to see her a lot. And to get her twice in 1 year, like when you sign on to a Marvel contract, you sign on to a Marvel contract. And so I'm so excited to see. And I hope, like you said, she gets a lot of screen time in episodes 5 and 6. It's being rumored that episode 5 next Wednesday is going to be the one that breaks the internet. So again, I hope we see Wilson Fisk. I hope we see more of
Yes.
Yelena. I hope it's just a fan servicey episode, and we deserve it at this point.
I feel like Wilson Fisk is like we're expecting this. We know this, and I feel like that is going to be huge, and I think it's going to break the internet. But I think it's going to do a lot. But I feel like there's got to be a little bit something more to it. I keep saying this, and I do not think it's a coincidence that literally the day before we are going to see Spider-Man, we are seeing this episode. We're seeing the introduction to more than likely Wilson Fisk, and then more than likely the next episode we're going to see the introduction MCU of Matt Murdock. I do not think that is a coincidence at all, and I would not be surprised if something mind-blowingly connects in Wednesday's episode. Obviously the time is different, so it's not going to be like, oh, we're going to see Spider-Man flying by maybe, but like I think something could connect because the way that these things are lining up, and Kevin Feige is a genius, I would not be surprised.
Well, even if you think back to episode 9 of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, that came out on Friday. On the Wednesday, no, actually, I think it was the same Friday before, whatever it was. There was an episode where on The Mandalorian,
Yeah.
Grogu, Baby Yoda, had a special force power that had never been seen before, and then Rey did the same thing in the
Yep.
Force or Rise of Skywalker. So there is some cohesive energy. Like I have a feeling that Disney Plus and Disney Studios that puts out the movies, and Sony, there was collaboration. There's a reason why they stuck to these release dates the way that they did. So definitely I could see some cohesion. I mean, do we know for sure that Spider-Man No Way Home isn't at Christmas?
I don't think we have I think it takes the start of the movie at least takes place almost immediately after Far From Home, and then we know that it takes place during his senior year. That's basically all we know.
But again, so Far From Home ends at the summer between his junior and senior year.
Yeah.
Could it pick up right there where it left off and do a time jump a couple months? Sure. Could it lead right into Christmas during his senior year? It's possible. I think it would be smart. And I mean, with Wilson Fisk, Kingpin being such a big Spider-Man villain, because like even going back to my childhood, I remember watching like the old Spider-Man cartoons and seeing Kingpin as the villain there. It would make me so happy to see Vincent D'Onofrio on Wednesday and then again on Friday or Thursday in a post-credit scene. Nothing would make me happier than even setting up like a Kingpin appearance in Spider-Man 4 or whatever it would be. Oh, that makes me excited. I was hoping for a post-credit scene today, and I kept waiting around. There was not one. I'd be willing to bet we get one episode 5, definitely episode 6. Like we only have 2 episodes left, and I would be surprised if a Marvel product does not put out a post-credit scene, wouldn't you?
Yeah, extremely surprised. It's usually at this halfway mark of the shows when we start to get them. So it is odd, and especially because there was one that was a lot of the credible leakers and reliable scoopers were talking about how there was going to be one for this one. So it was very interesting. Obviously things change. They do stay still credible. The industry is always changing. I would expect one for, at the very least, episode 6. More than likely, we'll see something for episode 5.
All right. Anything else you want to share on Hawkeye this week before we get into episode 5 next week?
Nope. Again, if for some reason, I doubt it, but if for some reason you haven't tuned in, definitely tune in, because it is turning out to be quite a special show that is going to be something repeatedly watched every holiday season.
For sure. That Christmas music always hits the spot.
Yes, it's so well done.
All right, moving from our review onto our main topic this week, we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about the Andrew Garfield duology of Amazing Spider-Man 1 and Amazing Spider-Man 2. Today, we're going to talk about the 2012 and 2014 films that attempted to reboot Spider-Man after Tobey Maguire's trilogy and before we get to Tom Holland's feature-length presentation in Civil War in 2016. So, JG, we just rewatched this. This was your first time watching Andrew Garfield. You give me your initial thoughts after watching them. Let's start there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I pretty much have watched them almost like Tobey's and then almost immediately into Andrew's. So it's interesting comparing the two. I, in some ways, like it more than Tobey's, and in some ways I don't. I think it is definitely a lot more mature and darker, which is interesting because I think I forget which director, but there was a director that's coming out that apparently was going to do a Spider movie that was going to be really dark. And I thought Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 were pretty dark, especially the second one. It's interesting. It just felt very mature. Like I wouldn't say like adult, like not like Deadpool, but it just felt a lot more serious. Yet at the same time, a lot of the action felt very animated, comic book like. I don't know what the word is. Like Toby's is a lot more grounded, and this just felt a lot more theatrical, a lot more big and over the top and dramatic, which in some ways worked, and in some ways it didn't. And I was like, okay, I get enough of the slow motion. I've seen it. But I think some of the like I personally really liked how just because it just comes to my top of my head. I liked what they did with the graphics with Electro. I thought that was beautiful, and so that makes me really excited for No Way Home.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's much darker, much more serious, much more adult than what we saw with I would say that the Tobey Maguire films are more of the comic booky, the more cheesy dialogue, the more, you know, I really liked how they gave them a chance to develop character development. Whereas you only have two Amazing Spider-Man films. And I know they had planned for more. They had planned for a Sinister Six movie. We'll talk more about the future later on. But I feel like with only two movies, I mean, you really focus on Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, excuse me, Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, and Gwen Stacy by Emma Stone. And like my wife was watching it with me, and she kind of said, isn't there a best friend? Because she was used to watching Harry Osborn in the Tobey Maguire movies and Ned in the Tom Hollands. And I said, you know what? It's a smaller cast when you think about it. It really wants to focus more on Peter Parker. And, the opening scenes to both films really try to dive into this mystery. And I don't even know how much of this is from the comic books or how much was made up for this film about Peter Parker's parents. And I know there was one point, I don't know if you knew this, where they were going to end Amazing Spider-Man 2 with revealing that Peter Parker's dad had survived and he was going to show up at the end. So I'm kind of glad they didn't, because that would have been quite the cliffhanger to end with you not getting a third movie. Do you feel like there's still more story to be told with this version of Spider-Man after seeing these two films?
In my honest opinion, no. I mean, I think there could be new stories told, but there's nothing that immediately leads me from these first two films that like I need to drastically see what happens next or anything. You can still tell more stories, like we're gonna see Andrew Garfield next week, like, but it directly in that universe in those movies, no, there really isn't at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like it does wrap it up enough. Like I remember seeing this in the theater and how much it bothered me. I guess I didn't know about the whole Gwen Stacy death, which is so famous in the comics. And even watching it again last night before we were recording this, when she hits the ground there, that is so devastating, because the Peter Parker we know always, he comes out on top. He survives. He does the right thing. And you don't expect him to lose the way that he loses. It felt like Rocky, when Rocky loses in the first movie and he doesn't win until Rocky 2. It almost felt like it was hard to watch again, because even though I knew it was coming, he did not want her there. And it kind of, I don't know if it bothered me, but like they talk about in the end of the Amazing Spider-Man 2, he took about 5 months off. I wish in a way we could have seen more of him dealing with that. And I know you've brought up the theory before, and other people have too. Maybe if Andrew Garfield gets the chance to save MJ in No Way Home, that would redeem his failure here at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2. And that would be the perfect ending then, because he didn't get that ending here. Can I ask about, what are your thoughts? They chose to focus on Spider-Man or Peter and Gwen's relationship instead of MJ. MJ shows up in a deleted scene for Amazing Spider-Man 2 by, she's played by Shailene Woodley from Divergent movies. Are you glad they kept a kind of a different love interest, kind of make it stand out differently than the first three films?
I think it was very smart to do that, because we know the story of Spider-Man. He gets bit by a spider, Uncle Ben dies, he falls in and out of love and breaks up and breaks with Mary Jane. So I think just changing it a little bit just to have Gwen, I think really worked. And I think what really worked was their chemistry. I will say, the one thing that worked for me, I'm a helpless romantic, and when you can do romance really well and you have two actors who are super compatible, And yeah, that's what I even knew because I mean, I didn't know going into it until I think once that second or the trailer for No Way Home came out, because then everybody was talking about that scene. That's when I found out. So I knew it was coming, but still, it was so heartbreaking because there was so much chemistry between these two actors, and gosh, they were so good. Like I will say, they made Peter Parker, they made Spider-Man sexy, and that is something you don't see. Like you really don't, and it is very mature but very well done to the point where it wasn't cheesy and it didn't feel like inappropriate either.
And you've mentioned, I think even earlier this episode, we talked about everyone's thinking and expecting Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned, like, could we get Miles Morales? Sure. Emma Stone is 33 years old. That's, a nice age gap between her and Tom Holland. Wouldn't it be nice to see her as a variant that survived playing Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen? Because, I mean, I don't know much about Spider-Gwen, but I loved her character in Spider-Verse, and now seeing her in the Spider-Verse 2 trailer. Like, wouldn't it be great for Emma Stone to come back and play a different version of Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen? Would you love that?
I'll lose my mind. I will literally probably there'll probably be a few others. I will be among a few other people that will probably be standing, screaming, and clapping. Heck yeah, I love Emma Stone. Bring her back. And then as Spider, oh yeah, Steven, you can't tease me with this. I want this now.
Like, that would make me more excited than seeing Kristen Dunst as MJ
Yeah.
again. It really would. I think give her the chance because she did such a great job in those two. Like, she's so relatable. Like, I love her in La La Land. I love her performances. Like, she is such a great actress. And to come in now and be the superhero instead of the damsel in distress, I want to see it.
Yes.
Let me ask you your next question. So, in the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire films, we had 3 films to watch Harry Osborn change from friend to questioning Spider-Man to really becoming the Hobgoblin. In this film, we only have about an hour and a half, 2 hours to watch the relationship between Peter and his old friend, who we really didn't see any relationship with till this movie, and then seeing him go through his transformation. It was a lot quicker, it was a lot more sudden, and it led to Gwen Stacy's death. Thoughts on the 2 different versions of Harry Osborn that we received?
Yeah.
And Norman Osborn, for that case, because we barely got any Norman Osborn in these 2 films.
So I said last week that Harry does like one of my favorite parts of the first 3 movies. I thought that was like so well done. I love that arc. It's so constructed well. It's so heartbreaking. It's beautiful. I think that this is the weakest part of the Amazing Spider-Man films. I think that this was how do I say this respectfully? It really felt garbage. I left that second film being like, wow, we were really spoiled in Tobey Maguire's films because I just did not like it at all. And it's because of how well done they set that story up through those 3 films, and they take their time with it, and you see it evolve over time. This just felt so rushed, so quick. You didn't have that sense of friendship and connection. Like, they showed it to you, but we didn't get to feel it because we didn't get like that first film where they're their friends and they're there for each other, and you don't see the pain of like him losing his father. Like, it was so sloppy, like so sloppy. I will say though that because Gwen's death, in my opinion, works. It sucks because she's incredible and amazing, but her death really, I think, works because it is shocking. It is talking about the consequences of being a hero, and you are going to lose people, and you can't save everyone. I will say that's maybe the only good thing that came out of Harry, but besides that, I hate saying good thing because it's not a good thing, but story-wise, good thing. But yeah, overall, was not a fan.
Yeah, I agree. It happened so quickly here. And it was hard to kind of take in because like we barely got any time with Norman Osborn, and then we were expected to care because he had played such a big part there. I'm trying to find here. Do you remember? Here it is. I just found it. Before we got the announcement that Sony and Marvel were working together, there were a series of leaks regarding the Amazing Spider-Man franchise that was going to continue. Do you remember that at all, or were you not into it at that point?
Nope.
I'm going to share a couple things with you, and I want you to tell me your thoughts. I just found the link.
All right.
So these were leaks that came out of emails from inside of Sony, okay, Amy Pascal and others. One of them was the original release for Amazing Spider-Man 3 was supposed to be 2016, the same year that we got that we got Spider-Man in Civil War. And so it was part of a 2-part film that they were going to make 2 sequels, Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4 together. They were really going to build up a universe, excuse me. If you remember at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, we see the different items like Doc Ock's tentacles. We see Vulture's backpack. We see a few things there. They were really going to set up a Sinister Six movie, okay? It was going to focus on Andrew Garfield again. Mark Webb was going to return for part 3, but not part 4, they said. Norman Osborn's decapitated head was going to still work as Green Goblin, as Norman Osborn. It was going to deal with Gwen's death. There was something else that stood out too. And, I'm reading here now, Kevin Feige was actually instrumental in saying, these ideas are horrible. You need to stop and let me work with you. Because they were actually planning not only as Sinister Six spinoff, they were planning a spinoff based in the 1950s or 1960s with Aunt May being an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it was going to be an Aunt May prequel film. Like, they wanted to do their own universe. And I'm so glad that Kevin Feige stepped in, because hearing just some of these ideas they had about like a Norman Osborn head and rushing into the Sinister Six and rushing into an Aunt May prequel film, they made the right decision to halt the brakes, work with Marvel, and still now start fresh now with Venom and with Morbius and with Kraven now, because they at least have some guidance. Because if they would have done that, it would have crashed and burned like the worst cinematic universe you could have imagined. Any thoughts on anything I just shared with you?
Wow, it's actually really interesting you bring that up, because so I have gotten into that point actually in the Marvel Studio book, which is really interesting because they don't dive into much of the Sony side of things. What they do dive into though is that deal, that initial talk of getting him into Civil War. And yeah, there was that point where it's like, yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is not going to do well. And it's interesting because Amy Pascal was very taken back by it. There is that infamous line now. I didn't realize that this is where it came from, but it is in the book, where she says, I don't know, I either threw him out of the office or I threw a sandwich at him whenever they introduced the idea of bringing him into the MCU and for them to stop doing what they're doing. But it works. It's working now. I can't even imagine, like, that just, it sounds like they're going for the most extreme possibilities for shock factor, just to go completely like bombastic and over the top. And that's what really Amazing Spider-Man, what I've seen from the duology, it really is. It's that over the top, that zany, that just ridiculous, just craziness. And if they were to keep going with it, it was going to get only crazier, apparently. And I'm just so glad that now, they've taken a step back. Amy Pascal is no longer, the head of Sony anymore, but she's still attached very much to the Spider-Verse. And so I think that they've got a good relationship, and that as we've seen now, things are going in a way better direction. And I'm glad, comparing, like, we're not rushing, like, we're taking our time. Like, more than likely, we might not even have a Sinister Six in this movie next week. As far as we know, there's 5 villains, and like, that's not really an official Sinister Six. So yeah. I'm so thankful that is not MCU proper. Can you imagine us talking about that today if that was actually the case?
I can't imagine it, and I'm so glad. Like, if Sony and Marvel had never made that deal back before Civil War, we'd still be watching so many like B-rate Spider-Man movies and having A+ Marvel movies.
B is generous.
B is generous. And I mean, while I like Venom, it's still not on the same level as the Marvel Cinematic Universe films. And my only hope would be that, hypothetically, if Spider-Man, we know he has one more movie, Tom Holland, with Marvel Studios. Could Sony throw him into Venom 3 and do their own thing with our version of Tom Holland? Sure. Could he show up in Kraven, The Last Hunt? Sure. Could he have a cameo in Morbius? Yeah. I hope that Amy Pascal and Sony have learned a lot from their collaboration with Marvel. Like, I'd be very curious, and I don't know if the book has told you more when you get to that point, what percent is Marvel, what percent is Sony working on these Spider-Man films, because I really hope that Sony can learn and take what they've learned and really make the appearances when Tom Holland shows up, whether it's in a cameo, whether it's in a supporting role, whether it's in a lead role, don't let his appearances tarnish his legacy from how great it's been so far. That's my only hope.
I will say quickly, the vibes that I get so far, because so far it's touched definitely on Civil War, and we're basically at the beginning steps of the first one, Homecoming. It's very much the vibes I get specifically for Spider-Man, and I'm pretty sure this doesn't apply to the other ones. But for Spider-Man himself, it really does feel like that the story and the creative is all Marvel. Sony is literally here's the money. We're gonna do the advertising. We're gonna do the trailers. We're gonna do we're gonna do all that. Most of the money. Most of the story creative is on the Marvel side of things, and I'm pretty sure though for like the Venom and all that stuff that does is Sony proper, not Marvel. But for Spider-Man, at least, that is with Marvel.
Can I share also how glad I was with Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland that they, with the exception of the Hobgoblin in Amazing Spider-Man 2, they really focused on new villains every movie, where they could have easily gone back to the well. Like, let's just go through real quick. Tobey Maguire, Green Goblin, Tobey Maguire 2, Doc Ock. Then we had Sandman, we had Hobgoblin, we had Venom. Next, new story. Now we have Lizard, we have Electro, and then we have Hobgoblin. And now here we are. We've got Vulture, we've got Mysterio, and now finally, after 20 years, now's the time to bring back all these favorite villains. Like where it left off with the last place we saw Lizard, he was locked up in a mental institution, and he kind of had, he saved Peter Parker at the end of Amazing Spider-Man. So I know I ask this all the time, and Electro kind of blew up, right? The last place we saw him.
Yeah.
Also, Electro looks very different, even though it's the same actor. They're more comic accurate now in No Way Home. Are you expecting Lizard and Electro to be the same Lizard and Electro, or are you expecting them to be variants? And my next question is, do you expect to see Lizard as Kurt Connors or only as Lizard in No Way Home?
I'm going in with the expectation that they are the same and they are continuing the story, but also mentally prepare myself for them to be variants due to Loki and all that good stuff. I think we'll see him. I think we'll see him as himself for probably for a scene, because I think you get that actor back, use him. So
yeah, and I wonder if they did get him back. I haven't heard anything yet, but
that is a good question. That is.
They might have just kept it to the Lizard form just so they didn't have to get the actor back. But I hope that they did even for a scene that would make it more meaningful.
I will just say also real quick, because I didn't mention this, and probably was one of the first things I should mention. I actually, despite these films being very messy, I think the first one's actually a really solid film. Maybe not as good as the other ones. I know it's hard to tell. Definitely not as good as 2. Definitely better than 3. But I will say, I think I like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man more than Tobey Maguire's. I think, which says a lot. Andrew Garfield probably is becoming one of my up there actors for me, just because I've been seeing him a lot out of nowhere. There was this, I don't know, something that he brought to it that, I don't know, I kind of resonated a little bit more with, and I don't know why. But I think I lean just slightly like they're like really close. It's just like it's the teeter tots like just slightly leaning towards Andrew.
I have a hard. I mean, do you still view Tom as your favorite, or is Andrew your favorite?
Oh, Tom is definitely the best. Yeah, Tom is. That's not even close. Like Tom is like you can't even see it, like up here, and then the other two are like kind of like going back and forth. It's kind of like how I feel when I wake up.
I know. I'm kind of 100% in agreement with you there. Tom is my favorite. He's such a great character to watch, the way he performs it, and I can't wait to see how where he takes the character in No Way Home, because I think he's going to take us to some different places. I go back and forth too. I mean, obviously Tobey Maguire was the first one I saw, and I feel like I've seen his films more. I think I've only seen Amazing Spider-Man now twice or 3 times, the 2 films. But I do like, I mean, I think Tobey Maguire is maybe more of a nerd, where Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield's more, he seems like a cooler kid. He seems like he's definitely more into the science. Like he's doing a lot more with the experimentation. I don't know. I think I'd have to read more Spider-Man comic books. I'm currently reading one on Marvel Unlimited, where the very first introduction of the Sinister Six way back in the 60s. Oh, wow. And it's like a 70-page issue, and it's very long and very detailed, and it's very 1960s cheesy, but it's still very good. Any other thoughts? I mean, we've been talking for a while. We've had a longer episode, but it's been great to really celebrate this month of Spider-Man. Like, I'm so glad we rewatched these, and I can't wait till next week when we get back into the Tom Holland 2 films. Any other thoughts on Andrew Garfield?
Nope. I was impressed with his acting. I was impressed with a lot of the actors, to be honest. Is very well acted. I think just a lot of this. I think unfortunately the actors were not given a great script. It's a very mature. It brings sexy to Spider-Man that I don't know if we wanted or needed, but we have it. And overall, it's a good time, and I'm excited to see how all these different iterations are going to come together next week.
Me too. So, we did not have any fan questions this week, and we really hope we do hear from you because, again, this is episode 16, excuse me. Join us, please. Come and talk to us more. We're in 16 episodes. We've gone 16 weeks in a row. We want to hear from you, and especially as we get ready for our next film, our 4th film of the year here coming up next week. We also, I know JG, I want to give him credit. He does a great job. Like, I hate to admit it, I put together some of the stories on the weeks that I host, but JG goes above and beyond to really edit the episodes. And he also has recently posted them on YouTube, on 1138 Productions on YouTube. JG, please give yourself some hype. Talk about what else you're putting out this week. Give yourself some credit.
No, it's just the little stuff. It's stuff for you guys to be able to another way for you guys to enjoy it. Steven undersells himself. He does so much more than he realizes. So yeah, I'm also making some videos on my personal channel, Cars. I do reactions. They're coming up. I took a little mental break, but they'll be coming up. Hawkeye's coming up, along some other things. And I also have Book Bounty, which is all about collecting Star Wars books.
And JG, I don't know, some of our audience might have already checked out at this point, but if they're still listening, what were you working on today for our podcast? Give a little tease about what's coming in early January.
Yes. I'll just tease it. I think we'll talk more about it next week. But let's just say, it's award season. A lot of these shows are getting nominated for awards. A lot of Emmys are coming out and Oscars and all that stuff. But yeah, we're going to have a fun time with our own version. Talk about it probably more next week.
Yes, we will be teasing that up. So if nothing else needs to be said for today, again, please, if you can do us a favor, share our audio link, whether it's on whatever you listen to our podcast on. Again, we're at 1138 Productions. We're also on YouTube now because JG has been adding some awesome links and video and screen caps there. So this is going to wrap up episode 16 of Marvelcast. We've been talking for quite a while. We hope you've stuck with us, have enjoyed our news, our Hawkeye discussion, and our Andrew Garfield. Next week, join us when we come back here with some more news, Hawkeye episode 5 and Tom Holland's 2 films. I got to watch them this weekend again. We hope you enjoyed listening and diving into Marvel with us. And we want our fans to interact with the podcast. So we want to hear from you. So please email us at marvelcastpod@gmail.com. We'll be waiting for your news and your feedback. Please subscribe to 1138 Productions feed wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a review wherever you listen. It really helps us a lot to kind of grow and get our name out there. From myself and JG, we hope you have a marvelous week. And remember,
I could do this all day.